Welcome to this explainer. Listen, if you're a homeowner, I know exactly why you're here. You've probably noticed that creeping damp feeling in your home, right? Or maybe you've caught a whiff of those musty odors drifting up from beneath your floors. And honestly, you're just feeling the anxiety of having to finally deal with it. I get it. You've probably had a few contractors out to look at your crawl space, and the advice they gave you was completely contradictory. One guy tells you to seal the whole thing up tight, and the next guy insists it desperately needs to breathe. It's incredibly confusing. But stick with me today, because we're going to clear the air once and for all.
First things first, let's talk about why you absolutely need to care about this. You might be sitting there thinking, well, it's just the crawl space. It's basically the outdoors, right? Actually, no. What happens in your crawl space definitely doesn't stay in your crawl space. There's this fascinating phenomenon in building science called the stack effect. Essentially, your house works kind of like a giant chimney. As the warm air inside your home naturally rises and escapes through your upper levels or your attic, it literally pulls replacement air right up from the bottom of your house, straight from your crawl space. So any dampness, any mold spores, or stale air lingering down in the dark, it is naturally moving right up into your living room. So figuring out this debate is absolutely critical for your family's indoor air quality and overall health.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap. We're going to logically untangle this whole thing. We'll cover 1. The crawl space debate. 2. Defining the buzzwords. 3. Moisture control fundamentals. 4. Why passive ventilation fails. And finally, 5. The intelligent middle ground.
Jumping right in, Section 1, the crawl space debate, and the us versus them trap.
Now, if you were building a brand new house from scratch, building science is pretty straightforward. But retrofitting an existing home, man, that is a messy, stressful reality. You're dealing with existing construction, weird grading, tight access points, and literal years of moisture history. And because of this, contractors often force you into this really rigid either-or choice. Encapsulation versus ventilation. Seal it entirely or let it breathe. Contractor A says closing the vents causes rot. Contractor B says leaving them open invites mold. It makes you feel like picking the wrong one is going to be a total catastrophe. But here's the secret. This whole us versus them debate actually hides the real issue.
Moving on to Section 2, defining the buzzwords. What are we actually saying here? The main reason this debate gets so incredibly heated is simply because everybody in the industry is using the exact same words in very, very different ways. Take encapsulation, for instance. When a contractor throws that word around, they might mean something entirely different than what you're picturing. To one guy, it literally just means throwing a simple plastic vapor barrier over the dirt. Done. To another, it means closing off your vents. And to someone else, it means a fully sealed, insulated Fort Knox-style space with a massive commercial dehumidifier. So when they're arguing, they're often not even talking about the same thing. And the exact same thing happens with ventilation. Listen, not all ventilation is created equal. Some people hear that word and immediately think of those old, rusty, open foundation vents that just passively let whatever outdoor air happens to be blowing by into your crawl space. Others think of manually dragging themselves under the house to open vents in the summer and close them in the winter. But wait, there's also advanced, intelligently controlled air exchange systems. Treating all of these like they are the exact same thing is a huge mistake. And once we realize that, it really sets the stage for looking past all these confusing buzzwords.
All right, Section 3, moisture control fundamentals. Let's look at the common ground.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that despite all the fierce arguments in the industry, everybody actually agrees on the foundational science. No matter what fancy term you use for the final solution, the fundamentals of moisture control do not change, and they have to happen in this specific order. Step 1, stop bulk water intrusion. If you have a leaky pipe, terrible yard grading, or foundation cracks letting standing water in, look, no fancy fan or expensive dehumidifier is going to fix that, period. Step 2, control ground moisture. Moisture is constantly evaporating out of the dirt, so a good solid vapor barrier is just non-negotiable. And step 3, add a drying action. Once the liquid water and the bare ground are handled, you've got to control the air in that space. And that is exactly where the real conversation about ventilation or dehumidification actually begins.
Which brings us to Section 4, why passive ventilation fails and the serious danger of open vents.
If your home still relies on the old-school method of just leaving traditional foundation vents open all year round, this is more than likely why you're dealing with those musty odors upstairs right now. The problem isn't the concept of ventilation, the problem is uncontrolled ventilation. Think about the physics here for a second. Picture a hot, humid summer day. The air outside might feel normal to you, but it's carrying a massive load of moisture. Now your crawl space is tucked away in the shade beneath your house, right? So it's much cooler. When that hot, humid summer air just passively drifts through an open vent and hits your cool crawl space, it acts exactly like a freezing cold glass of lemonade sitting on your porch in July. It causes immediate condensation. Those passive vents are actively bringing moisture in, making things way damper instead of drying them out.
This quote really hits the nail on the head. Open vents do not know whether outdoor air is helpful. They simply allow air exchange. It is a total roll of the dice based on whatever the weather decides to do that day. And, by the way, even if a well-meaning contractor installs basic fans hooked up to a standard humidistat, it still fails. Why? Because a basic humidistat only measures the air inside the crawl space. It might kick a fan on because the inside is feeling a little damp, completely blind to the fact that it's currently pouring rain outside, meaning it's actively sucking worse air in. Total disaster.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this all builds into the intelligent middle ground, finding true synergy.
We seriously don't have to choose between a suffocating, sealed-up box or a totally exposed, vulnerable space. If we compare those old passive systems to modern, intelligent systems, it's night and day. An intelligent moisture control system actually compares the conditions inside the crawl space with the conditions outside at the exact same time. And it doesn't just look at basic temperature or relative humidity. No, it tracks the dew point. Dew point is the absolute secret weapon here. It gives you a crystal clear, accurate picture of the actual moisture content floating in the air. By comparing the indoor dew point to the outdoor dew point, the system knows precisely what needs to happen.
And because it's constantly crunching all that data, the intelligent system asks this brilliant ultimate question before it ever decides to open a vent or bring in a single breath of outside air. Is the outside air helpful right now? Think about how smart that is. If the outside air is cooler and drier and can actually pull moisture out of your crawl space, boom, it ventilates. If the outside air is hot and sticky and will cause condensation, it keeps things firmly closed, protecting your home. It's using favorable outdoor air, which is literally free energy from nature, only when it's beneficial to you.
But, what happens when it rains for 3 days straight and the outside air just isn't helpful? That brings us to synergistic dehumidification. Look, even the most powerful dehumidifier money can buy can only dry the air that physically reaches it. And crawl spaces, they're like giant obstacle courses. They're full of beams, concrete piers, and tight corners. If you don't have air moving, you get these damp, stagnant, dead zones. So, a completely intelligent strategy uses internal circulation fans to constantly sweep the air out of those tight little nooks, pushing it right toward a dehumidifier. The dehumidifier acts as this incredibly efficient mechanical backup drying system for those times when Mother Nature just isn't cooperating.
So the crucial point is this: the false dilemma finally ends here. It is not an either-or choice. Encapsulation and ventilation can absolutely work intelligently together. You can have a really high-quality sealed vapor barrier on the ground, intelligent ventilation that uses outside air only when it's helpful, and a dehumidifier backed up by internal fans to handle the rest of the heavy lifting. They aren't mortal enemies. They operate in total synergy to keep your home's foundation perfectly, safely balanced. As we wrap up today, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The very next time a contractor comes over and tries to strong-arm you into a rigid encapsulation versus ventilation package, I want you to abandon their buzzwords entirely. Take control of that conversation and ask them, what does this crawl space need to stay dry, healthy, and controlled? Because your home is totally unique, demand a custom, practical, and intelligent moisture strategy that works together, not against itself. That is how you finally solve the crawl space dilemma.